Welcome to the Suicide Monk podcast, a platform dedicated to fostering open and honest conversations about the deeply sensitive and complex topic of suicide. Before we delve into the narratives and discussions presented here, it's important to emphasize that we are not medical professionals, therapists, or counselors. We do not possess the qualifications to offer clinical advice or treatment. Instead, the Suicide Monk podcast serves as a safe space for individuals to share their personal stories and experiences, all while preserving their anonymity. We encourage our guests to tell their stories anonymously, recognizing that privacy and anonymity can be crucial for those who wish to share their experiences without fear of judgment or exposure. Our mission is to create a supportive community, raise awareness, and promote understanding, all while emphasizing that seeking professional help is crucial when dealing with mental health issues and suicidal thoughts. If you or someone you know is in crisis, please reach out to a mental health professional or contact the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline at 1-800-273-8255 for immediate assistance. Together, the Suicide Monk podcast aims to break the stigma surrounding mental health and let those who are struggling know they are not alone.
Welcome to the Suicide Monk. I'm your host, and today we're going to be listening to a buddy of mine who talks to you about his struggles with from a very young age with cross-dressing, OCD, anxiety, and a multitude of other things. And then he talks to us about how he manages that and just some of the exercises he does to maintain that and keep it at bay on a regular basis, on a daily basis. And there's a twist to the story, of course, and it's fantastic. Just sit back and listen. This is a good one. So basically what we're doing here is given, obviously I asked you to do this, tell your story and kind of what you grew up with, how you grew up. I've known you since you were a kid, so I know your family really well, but I just want you to kind of give a rundown of who you are, where you're from, not where you're from, but what you grew up in.
From the United States of America.
Yes, from somewhere far away from here.
So just like the summary.
Yeah, summary, and then
leading up to like.
Yeah, where you think it kind of went sideways for you, what, obviously the end result, and then the path that you're on now.
Yeah.
And what that looks like for you, and maybe some, how that's kind of changed your perspective. And
Okay. Yeah, okay. Well, I was born in the 80s, and my family, I've got a brother and a sister, an older brother and younger sister. I grew up in the church, so my dad was a pastor of a very cool church. My dad.
more a very contemporary church.
Yeah, very open-minded.
Yeah.
Liberal, considering how, rural the town is and how
very conservative.
Conservative it can
very,
be.
very conservative.
And so, grew up in the church. We went through a church split when I was, 5. And that's when my dad started his own thing, which was great because he got to find his voice, or he already knew his voice, but he really got to be as honest as he wanted. And the people really loved it. And they loved him for that. I think that it was probably a breath of fresh air.
Oh, it was great.
I think
it was so out of the norm for Christianity.
Yeah.
To be honest, it was, especially in a very conservative town, it was refreshing.
Yeah. Yeah, and he wasn't really any different at the house or in church. So that was also really cool. There was no faking it around the family. And same with my mom. She's always been herself. If you know her, she's like pretty outgoing. She basically raised us kids with a lot of tough love, and it was very unconditional, and it was very honest, just like my dad, which was nice because he always knew how she was feeling. You always knew if you messed up. and you kind of feared it, but also like she wasn't harmful. So maybe like a little emotional abuse here and there, but
Right.
nothing too crazy.
It doesn't get a little bit of that.
Yeah, and in growing up, I could always see myself in her, my anxieties, my struggles, and thinking about how she raised 3 kids without modern medicine, the stuff that I'm on is pretty respectable,
Yeah.
like it's really impressive. But she had some very dramatic episodes, very intense, and I've been there. And I'm pretty thankful to like be able to witness that and know things I want to change now that I'm a dad. But yeah, anyways, I'll go back. So 5 years old. I'll just dive right into the nitty to when I started feeling a little different, a little odd. Um, I'm gonna say some stuff that you don't know about me.
That's
Maybe
cool.
you do.
No, that's great, man.
So 5, I started becoming sexually active with myself. So I started masturbating at that age, which is, roughly 5 or 6 years younger than the average age. And it's because I was born, or maybe I grew into a sort of paraphilia, which is a fetish. And it's a cross dressing fetish. So I've always been attracted to dressing up as a woman.
Okay.
And I've learned a whole lot more about that throughout the years, and we can get into that, but it plays a pretty huge role in how my OCD manifested, how my relationship with Christianity worked itself out, and kind of where um, I kind of became a contrarian because I knew that myself at a very young age was kind of Christianity was pretty opposed to it, you know,
Yeah.
which was especially in a conservative town. And I was okay with it. I understood, and I kind of held the belief that you could, in the same sense that you could pray the gay away. I believe that what I was doing, who I was ultimately sinful. And what I had to do was basically not act on it.
But you didn't get that from your parents,
No,
did you?
no, that's the crazy part. I didn't get it from
Right.
my parents. I kind of based that in an assumption of what mainstream Christians were like. But it's also like, as a pastor's kid, you don't want to be different.
Right.
You kind of want to be the status quo. You don't want to disappoint your heroes, which growing up was my parents and still is.
Yeah.
Um, so like disappointing my dad was a huge disappointment to myself.
He's a hard man to disappoint, though.
He is. And so I kind of always feared that that would ultimately disappoint him. So I don't think I ended up telling my parents that I was a crossdresser till maybe like 11th grade, like a junior in high school. It was
Oh, wow.
super late. Yeah. So I just kind of kept it to myself. And then, I was in there during the dawn of the internet. So throughout the 90s, when like chat became available, I would kind of come out to my friends here and there. I think I came out to one close friend, maybe like freshman, sophomore year. So it was like very much so to myself. And I probably didn't even know it was called cross dressing until I was 7th or 8th grade.
Okay.
But I always knew I liked it. And it was like a sense of freedom for me. It was a sense of empowerment. Later, I would learn that it was a form of self love. And kind of going against that throughout my childhood was kind of a form of self-hatred. So I kind of, um, I kind of started hating myself at a pretty young age without really knowing it,
Hmm.
just hating
Interesting.
certain avenues. But I was also like, I had a really great group of friends. I really liked the church. I was hardcore Christian back then. Um, Hardcore belief. I wasn't like, proselytizing to people going on the streets and preaching or anything.
Right. Right.
It was fairly balanced. But I was also like good at sports, like snowboarding and skateboarding and stuff.
Oh, you were great, man.
So I had
Good.
some.
Good's not really doesn't really describe that.
So I was able to like.
You used to look up to me, man. I was like, well, you got a lot. You're gonna do a lot more than I am.
So I kind of like channeled all that energy to, a love for extreme sports.
Right.
And, did that throughout middle school and high school. And in high school, I was still really involved in the church. Really nothing changed with that until I was about 25. I was kind of a late bloomer when it came to deconstructing my faith. So in high school, I had middle school, I had my first like pretty heavy season of anxiety and depression, where I was just kind of lethargic the whole time. I was down. There was no real explanation for it. I was pretty quiet about it because I would still get spurts of joy, And so I kind of just kept it to myself. It was so foreign to me. I didn't even know.
Didn't really know how to identify it.
Exactly. Yeah. And I also think that it's like 7th grade is a confusing time.
Yeah.
For everybody.
Yeah.
But I think I was also just confused with the world.
Right. It's not hard to be.
Yeah.
No.
Because it was also exciting, It's a lot of things to look forward to when you're growing up. It's kind of never ending each day, even though you're doing the same school day pretty much day in, day out. Like meeting new types of people, being able to be romantic for the first time ever and like start to flirt is super exciting.
Right. Yeah.
It's a drug.
Yeah.
And I was constantly chasing that.
Huh.
I had like
as boys do.
Yeah, I had a new girlfriend like every other week.
Oh, geez.
It was fun. And I never really took school seriously. I knew it was something that I had to do, so I never argued about it. But I was like a C student.
Yeah, but if you wouldn't have had to work very hard to make an A student, you're a pretty damn intelligent guy. So
yeah, well, I appreciate that. Yeah, I don't remember ever trying in school. I was one of those guys.
You're just a natural dude. Just with sports and school, and you could just make it happen.
Good genes, man. My my
really?
parents. You played sports with my dad. He's an athlete. Brutal. He still is.
He's brutal for a pastor.
Yeah.
It's not very Jesus-y.
Right. High school was a trip. I went through another heavy season of anxiety.
Did you do any drugs in high school?
No, I was completely sober. I think not completely. I guess I drank like twice in high school. Okay. Yeah, never did any. I think we tried smoking weed one time through like a plastic cup on a boat. It was super windy. We took it from my buddy's dad's house. It was, and then like a couple cigars here and there, but I was like a pretty straight-laced kid.
Wow.
And I think it was because I was constantly entertaining myself to the nth degree. Like I would forget to eat, I'd be busy biking. I was really big into mountain biking too.
Well, and skateboarding earlier.
Yeah.
Than that.
Yeah. And then I got into, I tried football and I was just really bad with the whole team thing. And I was really scared of getting tackled. Like self-inflicted pain, I'm okay with.
Right.
But like if someone's coming at me about to tackle me, I'm scared shitless. I can't deal with it. Like I'm terrible in a fight. I don't know. I just wuss out, I guess.
Well, no, pain is definitely a shocker to the system.
Yeah. I forget where I was. Freshman year, I guess. I started really getting into music, into playing music.
Okay.
That was a huge part of my life. So I had like all these distractions and like so many little pockets of different friends. I had like my musician friends, my sports friends, my friends from growing up, just like people that I knew didn't have many friends. I'd love making friends with them because I think at my core, I always felt like an outcast. And so I loved meeting like-minded people.
Right.
But underneath it all was that like I started getting really into trans porn, not really into it in like an addictive manner, but I wasn't looking at the type of porn that my buddies were looking at.
Right.
And I never told anybody about it. And at one point I remember printing some off and my mom coming into the room and I'm like, frantically shutting everything down, which you might know doesn't shut the printer down.
No.
So it's like still printing out. And I'm like, nothing. I'm doing nothing. And she picks it up and she's like, what is this? And I'm like, I just basically ran into my room and hid.
Oh, man.
I think we talked about it, but how do you explain to your mom what trans porn is?
Well, I mean, you might have to explain it to me. Yeah.
Well, basically, like it was trans women pre-op, so they haven't gotten surgery underneath.
Okay. Yeah.
So yeah, I was just always into that at a very young age.
Huh.
And I think it's because I always saw myself in them as a cross-dresser. And then later, way later, cross-dressing took on a more romantic form, and so it became pretty distressing. I've started going as gender fluid, but I don't really outwardly express it much. I dress up as a guy, not like a man, but I guess maybe fairly androgynous.
Okay.
And it's because I deal with gender dysphoria, which is another part that led to my drinking that I'll
That's fair.
get to. But freshman year was also kind of when a lot of OCD was starting. I started doing some pretty weird things, like things that I didn't want to do.
Okay.
An example would be like gagging myself. I had to gag myself a certain amount of times. Wasn't anything sexual. It was just like if I didn't do it, there'd be a consequence. Back then, I don't remember what the consequence was, but it can take any form, like if you don't gag yourself 15 times, you're going to be gay, or you're going to, like, now it's like simple. It's like, you won't be able to sleep.
Right.
Which is a huge deal to me because I cherish sleep. Or your kids will die. That's the thing with OCD. It's not just like cleaning.
It's very, very extreme.
It's you have to do something. It's the impulse to do something, and then the compulsion to keep doing it because there's a consequence at the end. And if you don't do it just right, you typically fear something bad's going to happen, or you just repeat it until you do it right.
So do you end up, if it doesn't happen the way you have it in your mind, do you end up sabotaging yourself?
Yeah. It robs you of a lot of time and a lot of joy. It makes you feel really weird doing certain things. I remember getting caught by my buddy on the school bus. It was dark. It was the way back from a diving meet, like a swim meet. And I had to gag myself exactly 37 times, which is a lot of fucking times.
That's a lot of gagging.
And he looks at me. I look back at him after I'm done. He's just looking at me in this like really confused face. And I just became overwhelmed with terror,
Oh yeah.
Just
So
like,
do you think that's exposure in that situation?
I like
you just got exposed.
yeah,
for who you
yeah.
are.
Oh yeah, big time. Because you don't really know how to explain that either.
Yeah.
Like, I have to do this. And when you talk about these things out loud, and I consider myself a fairly rational person, doing OCD rituals is the most irrational thing.
Right.
But it's also rational, I guess, in the way that it helps you cope with certain life situations. Like, I have no doubt that it served as a survival mechanism for something. I'm not really sure what. Yeah, I guess it's just hopeful thinking. So
Interesting.
Yeah. So dealing with that throughout high school was definitely tough. And that's honestly probably where I had my first like thoughts of suicidal ideation. And my ideation comes in the form of like, I've never had a plan. I've never taken it to, a serious enough degree where I need to be put on like suicide watch or something.
Right.
But it's always taken the form of like a pity party. Like maybe life would be better without me.
Yeah.
And back in high school, it was like my parents' image is so good and I want to keep it that way. And so maybe it'd be better off if I wasn't here, and maybe, I don't know, maybe at its core, that's why I would, do some pretty stupid stuff. Like
Well, the rationalization of taking your life takes many different forms, and they're usually not very rational
Right.
at all.
Yeah.
Even on the path I'm on, there's some irrationality for, like, I have a legitimate story to send me down this road. Okay. But the irrational part is that I have a lot of people that love me.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of people that love me.
Yeah.
Like, the more I start to check out, the more they come out of the woodworks,
Including myself.
including yourself. Well, that's what we get when we start a suicide.
Am I allowed to say your name on this?
No.
Okay.
I don't want any.
I love you, Sarah. I want you to know that.
You can call me the Suicide Monk.
I love you, Suicide Monk.
Thank you,
Mr. Monk.
Right. Yeah. So, no, I don't want any. I don't want any ties to back home, and this is not for them. They don't understand it. I'll even be. They don't understand the last 20 years. It's conservative Christians, so they maybe 10. They want to condemn. Murder has been criticize or allow Christians to use against people. And it's like, well, how about we just have a conversation? Want to kill themselves? Yeah. Maybe I just need to vent a little bit so I can get past. I mean,
yeah. And I remember.
Thou shalt not kill.
Last night we were talking about
is that their
friend, and you
argument?
were saying that she was like, well, it's kind of like calling people who are pro-life. I thought about it last night, or pro-choice. Sorry, yeah, she thinks pro-abortion, going to hell because not the case. That's what happens to Christians. It's just a harsher way, or
and it's actually not a biblical.
It's just not the case. I mean, people want to
we have
paint certain things in a worse way, so they tack on a nice little name to it, like self-murder, and
it justifies their bad behavior in a righteous way.
Yeah, I think also people just really like rules.
I guess you could almost
true, and they love being able to justify the Bible to write those rules.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, and it's a shame, but I've never. And that's why I appreciate about your dad. I've never ever felt uncomfortable talking to him about my deconstruction, my lack of belief, my major questioning.
Yeah. Yeah, it should be noted that like my falling out, my deconstruction, my now like agnosticism, atheism isn't because of my parents. If anything, they kept me going for like another decade. Like if I was born into the Westboro Baptist Church, I would have been gone by age 8,
Right.
Because it just would have been too hard. It would have been too harsh. My dad and my mom made it so easy to be a Christian and to be, because it was all about love. And that's the only thing that mattered.
That's a new concept.
Yeah, crazy, huh? Yeah, it's like they paid attention to that Jesus story,
right?
But yeah, I mean, and we talked last night. Like that was one of the biggest hurdle to get over at the end was being able to separate myself from my dad and his beliefs. So being able to say I'm not a Christian anymore, which kind of broke my heart. Because I always wanted to be like my dad in so many ways. And there's still like a whole list of things I can be like my dad in, like being a dad, you know?
Yeah.
It's a super high bar, but like, at least I have that. At least I have.
Well, you have that bar.
Yeah.
Some people don't.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I at least had that growing up. So I don't know if you want to get back into high school.
Yeah, let's go back into the high school.
I'm almost done with high school.
Right.
Actually, yeah, I think I'm done with high school. Senior year was pretty rad. I loved it. I actually liked all of high school, which is kind of strange.
Yeah, that is.
Yeah, I really enjoyed my friends too. I mean, they kind of just helped me do it all. They were just so fun to be around. And we always did like just fucking weird things, like we had a dance party in a Taco Bell one time where we brought like a strobe light in, and it was under construction. Like my buddy worked there, so he had a key, and it was just like, it was innocent, silly stuff,
right?
All throughout high school,
but good memories,
great memories, great friendship, friends that I still have today, like really good friends. And I moved right after.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, you did.
so I spent senior summer at a Christian camp, which is hilarious to think back now, just how Christian I was, and unapologetically.
Right.
Like I was very proud. Um, but I was so similar to my dad that it was really tolerable for a lot of non-believers.
Oh.
Cause I hope I'd
Yeah.
like to think so since they, partied with me and stuff. But, yeah, once I moved out to Colorado, it was certainly like a culture shock to, in a weird way, like basically people lived and breathed snowboarding.
Yeah.
Which was the greatest thing ever.
Right.
So I went from this like kind of mediocre, not very cool person in high school to like a pretty cool person in college. I kind of got to reinvent myself,
Yeah.
which felt awesome. Wasn't like that cool being cool at a community college, It's like 10 to 1 guy girl ratio.
Well,
so.
see, you just touched on something that's actually really important that most people don't consider, and that's reinventing themselves.
Yeah.
I don't like that's what I'm doing right now.
Yeah.
I know I'm on a path and I'm going down this road. This path could change, but in the midst of it, I'm stripping myself of everything.
Mm-hmm.
And depending on the end result will depend on who I become.
Yeah. And like my mystical self around like 2010-ish would have said something like, that is the resurrection right there, is like dying to your past self, having a space of like not knowing what to do. That's what the Saturday, and then, rising on Sunday and reinventing yourself, becoming that new person.
Right.
And I don't know if I'd use that metaphor anymore, but I do find some beauty still in the Bible.
Well, I see, that's the thing. I mean, and I probably said this on other casts, but I mean, I'm not a Christian. I just have a belief system that I grew up with that I like. I've deconstructed it and reconstructed it, not to make my own rules, but to simplify it to something that I understand.
Mm-hmm.
And that I've spent so much time alone that who the hell else am I going to talk to but some omnipotent God that I choose to believe in? Whether it's true or not, fuck, I don't know.
Yeah. And ultimately it doesn't even matter, like if it helps you get through the day, and I don't want it to sound like a crutch, because I know it's something a lot deeper for you.
Well, maybe I don't know.
But if it helps you get through the day and it's not harming someone, then like, who cares? You know?
Yeah.
And at the end for me, I think it was doing myself a lot of harm because I got really into like apologetics and debates.
Okay. I'm not familiar with a lot of this.
Yeah. I got into like a lot of pretty like typical, like Richard Dawkins, Sam Harris, Christopher Hitchens. They're like the 4 horsemen, or 3 of the 4 horsemen of atheism. And then they would have these debates with these like really intelligent Christians, theological geniuses, like people who were able to decipher the Bible and relate it to historical evidence and all this stuff. So I started off as a Christian getting into those. And then by the end, I was like, okay, maybe I'm an agnostic. And it wasn't until Sam Harris's idea, and it wasn't his originally, but he was like the most modern version of the idea of determinism and free will, that it just made me lose kind of that idea that people have a soul and God creates you in his own image and you're unique and you have the ability to either decide if you're a Christian or not. That's the point of living on earth, is God giving you this free will and then deciding what you can do with it. Are you going to choose to believe, or are you going to choose not to? And I already think that that's a ridiculous thing. Like if you're born anywhere in the Middle East, you're not going to be a Christian probably
not.
Because it would be like telling someone here, hey, you should think about Islam, or maybe not here in Colorado, or wherever I am, in a more liberal state.
Right.
But maybe like in where I grew up, if you were like, hey, maybe you should look into Islam, people would take offense to that.
They would run you over with a bus 17 times.
Yeah. And I have to imagine that in the more like rural or fundamental Islamic places in the Middle East, if you were to say, hey, you should think about looking into Christianity or Judaism or Mormonism or anything, they'd be like, the fuck are you talking about, man?
Right.
Like, I would kill myself for this religion.
Right.
And so yeah, I think in the end it was like this idea of free will that I don't believe people have it, at least in the way that we like to think. I think it's an illusion. I think we're basically at each moment, at each present moment, we're the final product of like this compounded history, and we just make choices based on our previous choices. And I don't think we make our very first choices. I don't think there's like a me there, when I'm like, oh shit, I need to breathe. I'm out of the womb now. Or even when you're like more cognizant, maybe like around age 5, I still think that you are just the product of ages 0 through 4. And I guess maybe there's a soul, but I just don't think so. And that kind of led to the destruction of what little I had left in the Christian faith.
Okay.
And
so you are full-blown atheist.
I mean, I don't know. I like to.
I guess I've heard Ricky Gervais explain basically the difference between him and Christian, and that is he believes in one less God.
Exactly. Yeah. Like my parents are atheists to all the other religions.
Exactly. Which is 3,000 gods or something like that. However many.
Yeah. And I think that's a nicer way. I think the word atheism is
it's got a terrible connotation behind it.
Yeah. And I just feel people getting like, ooh,
well, and they do turn from you.
Yeah. And I don't have that reaction anymore, but I remember as a Christian, I really did.
Well, in our neighborhood, yeah, you would.
Yeah.
And not just the neighborhood, the whole damn town.
Yeah. It took guts to be an atheist.
Oh my God. You could not speak against anything.
Yeah.
Even opening a bar.
Basically, if you were an outspoken atheist in high school, you were of the vast minority.
Yeah.
And I always really, really I always was very drawn to them because it was like, holy shit, man, you have some serious guts.
Right.
Like, and you really know yourself.
Yeah.
So I always had like a huge admiration and ended up becoming really close friends with the atheists. And I don't know, some part of me always felt like I could get them to become a Christian, Yeah. But the other part,
I think that's the mentality of every Christian.
Yeah.
Is that I can convert and save somebody and do something for the kingdom of Christ. It's like, okay.
Yeah. For sure. I mean, you always wanted to get someone on your team. That was how trophies and points were given away, Yeah. Very, very Christian community. But still great.
But even if you read Christ, that's still very opposite of how he lived. Just a couple things. It's like, if a town doesn't accept you, just dust your feet off and move on. So it's not like he was there to force himself on anybody.
Right.
But that's what the whole Christian mentality is. Like, I've got to do this because I've been called to this. It's like, have you?
Yeah.
I mean, why don't you just love somebody?
Yeah. Yeah, it's just not enough.
Right. Actually, it is enough.
Well, it is, yeah. But it's not enough for
the
certain Christians, yeah.
I shouldn't say the faith-based because I'm faith-based, but
it's so broad at this point.
Yeah.
Who is a Christian and who isn't?
And it's definitely gotten looser in the community in the last 20 years, for sure. I mean, now we're looking. The school allows the kids that dress up like kitty cats and I don't know what they call them, furries.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, so it's gotten more liberal in the town.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's kind of the role of a public institution.
Yeah, but man, that they have had a strong hold on controlling what comes and goes in that town for a very long time.
Yeah.
I mean, the wealthy money is Christian in nature, so they control the narrative and they get away with it.
Yeah, it was still pretty fair though. Like I don't remember though ever learning about evolution in high school. Like that was a fairly new concept to me in college, which is crazy.
See, I think we learned about it, but it was not extensively.
Yeah, in and out in 1 hour.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then I mean you're indoctrinated, so it doesn't really make sense to you. So
Yeah.
it's like, well, that didn't happen. Well, I guess what? The possibility of it happening
Yeah.
is pretty damn good.
Yeah.
And if you think your God can't do that, then you're naive. And that's the way I think about it. It's like if you believe in a God and you think this omnipotent, all-powerful genie that's going on up there can build all this in 7 literal days, but can't make it last 44 billion years or whatever, 4.65 billion years.
Yeah.
That's ludicrous.
You have to take the Bible either completely literally and kind of deny a lot of science, or you have to take it very loosely. And if you want to believe in science, and if you take the Bible really loosely, like it's kind of a trap, because you then realize you can use the Bible to get your way, to basically do anything.
Oh man, narcissists are great at it. You see that
like
all the
it's
time.
it was used to justify slavery. We got some dogs roughhousing.
Yeah, we do. Yeah. Yeah, we're good. Yeah.
Yeah.
You can use the Bible to justify anything.
Yeah. Literally anything. I mean, you can put meaning into you can just make it mean so much more than what it is. It's
True.
just you can take the whole book and turn it into a million metaphors. And so for one piece of scripture to mean one thing and for it to mean another thing, I kind of just concluded it makes it meaningless. And it's just a very slippery slope, I should say. So if you are going to become like a Christian mystic and, treat the Bible as pure metaphor, it can be beautiful. And I'd say a lot of mystics choose to treat it as a thing of beauty. But when you have others that are treating it as a weapon to get their way,
well, you've destroyed the purpose of it at that point.
Yeah. And it really kind of ruined me.
Yeah. Well, so, and it sounds like the people ruined me on it. But it sounds like, I mean, even when the people ruin you, you start asking questions.
Yeah.
And then you run down that road.
Yeah. And the people were actually the last thing. I would say actually the people never ruined me.
Really?
Except for the ones like on TV and stuff, like
I guess that would have been different.
The ones that were closest to me were the ones that kept me believing for the longest.
Wow.
That was my last thread of hope, was the people. I mean, that was it. Like I felt bad when I became like a self-described agnostic. Because I just felt like I was hurting my dad.
Well, and that's fair.
Yeah. And my mom. I shouldn't place it all.
Well, yeah. I mean, yeah, we tend to forget mom because sometimes, but she's just always been a powerhouse. So basically, is that you start asking the questions and then.
Yeah. So in college, and yeah, I should go back to when I moved out to Colorado. Speaking of reinventing, like what we were talking about earlier, it was my chance. It was my opportunity to I was going out there with 0 people that I knew. Eventually other people moved out here from my hometown, but it wasn't for a while. And that first year was kind of just me on my own. I was a new person. And it didn't feel like I was making anything up. I was just being the person I wanted to be. And it was more accepted at this little community college out in Colorado.
Did you struggle with anxiety during that time?
No,
of that
not at all. Not at all. It was probably the least anxious I've ever been.
Really?
Yeah. And I think it was because there was no, like, each day brought on something new and something exciting. If there was any form of anxiety, it was like the healthy anxiety, like wanting to do well in school. So you study really hard. And that's driven by your anxiety for that test, you know?
Right.
Um, my anxiety was like just being unsure about what the future was. But it was wonderful, and that was when I was introduced, not really introduced, but like that's when alcohol started coming into my life in a very major way because I was a musician and I was a snowboarder, and in those two scenes, drinking is just a huge, huge part of it.
Yeah.
And I was in the service industry. I got a job at a deli, at a local deli. And, it wasn't uncommon for us to trade sandwiches for beers, or like every single night after work, we would just go to the bar across the street and that's where we'd spend all of our tip money.
Yeah.
It was the norm. We'd go to happy hour. I always had a blast doing this. And this is something probably a young man's game, but we would go out to happy hour and just like slam, like 3 IPAs. And then we'd go on our mountain bike ride. And then we'd get back home, we'd shower up and it's just like, where's the party? Go to the party. And then I was good at like, okay, as long as I'm done drinking, it doesn't matter how much I'd have to drink. As long as I was done drinking 8 hours before I had to wake up, I was good to go. And I was always good to go.
So you were managing well.
I was managing well, and it was the holy grail of like keeping my anxiety, keeping all those OCD behaviors at bay. And it helped me really open up too about my cross-dressing, because I would drink a little bit and then I'd tell some people. And that was also like the dawn of AOL Instant Messenger. So like I was able to talk about things that I wouldn't want to talk about face to face because I wouldn't have to see that initial reaction.
Right.
You could really be kind of creepy.
Yeah. Well, and honestly, that's kind of the point of this podcast, is to give a voice.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't have to see anybody's reaction. So I'm kind of just like willy nilly,
Right,
who gives a fuck? And that's how it was when you were able to chat with people. And we'd been chatting, I guess, online for 4 years. There was always some weird app, like ICQ was the first one.
Okay.
And then AOL was the big one, which turned into like iMessage. And now it's just, everything is instant message now.
Right.
The idea of a chat room probably wouldn't really make sense to, a young buck.
Like, yeah, I don't know what's going on out 15.
There anymore. They'd be like, what are you talking about?
Right.
I don't know. So yeah, drinking and being able to just chat to people online really opened up who I was, and I was able to be myself online for a while.
Anonymously.
Yeah. And I would tell my friends too, and it was just so nice because they were so far away. I wouldn't have to deal with the repercussions.
Right.
And that was honestly a really good thing. I was definitely wussing out in a way by letting there be a screen in between us, but like a lot of the reactions were super negative.
Oh, dude.
And so I was really thankful that I could kind of like give them their space.
Yeah.
And then let them
to process it.
Yeah. Yeah. And then I'm just like over there partying,
right.
like, yeah, sucks to suck.
Yeah.
Which I realize is like, now I realize is fairly, it's unfair, but I also was like really lonely in that part of my life.
Well, I'll tell you this, and from my recent experience of telling my friends what road I'm on, it's questionable.
Yeah.
Because it's very taxing to explain to them who you are and why you are the way you are. And then they don't understand it. And then they're bound by their belief system. So it's very hard for them to, well, number one, let go of a belief system to accept you, because if they accept you, then they think they're endorsing it. And it's like, no, you're just actually loving me as your friend.
Yeah, it's a weird one because it doesn't really take a side politically. I'm sure more like left-leaning people are probably more open to the idea of what did you call it? A doctor-induced suicide?
Yeah, physicians-assisted suicide. Yeah.
Okay, physicians-assisted suicide. But even for lefties, it's like a very tough thing.
Oh, it's terribly hard.
And it, you think that like someone or someone who's like maybe more of like a libertarian, individual rights sort of person,
Right.
they would love this idea,
Right.
because it is the most individual thing you could ever possibly do.
It's the one thing you can completely control.
Yeah.
In your life.
But it's just not okay.
It's not
by a lot of people's standards, even if they do have that philosophy.
Well, I'm even though I'm going down this road, I do not endorse suicide at all. I think it's a terrible place to be.
And I think it might be rooted in something deeper. Like, for me, like death is the scariest thing ever. Like it's something that I was okay with when I had a faith, when I had an afterlife. But now that I don't, and the idea of that finality and it being absolutely 100% going to happen and completely unknown territory, like I just can't think of anything freakier, which is totally illogical because I can't think when I'm dead.
Right.
So it's just nothing. It's like falling asleep. You wake up and you're like, where was I the past 6 hours? Who gives a fuck? You didn't know, like it doesn't make a difference. And the idea of not waking up for some reason is so scary to me. And so I think a lot of people's problem with physicians assisted suicide or just suicide in general and being on board with it at all is like their fear of death and their fear of the finality.
I would agree with you on that for sure.
At least it is for me. I'm purely projecting.
Well, being on this side of it and looking at other people and being somebody who watches people to observe behavior so I know how to function in the world appropriately because I'm a weird kid. I grew up with a lot of abuse, so I had to watch to learn behavior, learn how to laugh and what's appropriate and what's inappropriate. And I didn't always succeed at that, but shit, I lost my thought. Fucking train station gone.
Oh, damn, the devil's lettuce getting at you again.
Damn it.
So, should we try and figure out where you were going?
No. What was your last comment?
Yeah, I mean, I am curious as someone who's landed on the idea of like basically putting death into their own hands, essentially giving yourself a death date, which isn't something a lot of people get to do.
Right.
That is maybe my worst nightmare. But as someone who's come to terms with it, like, how do you perceive death?
I don't know what's next. But I'll tell you this, I'm tired of living in hell. A metaphorical hell. And that's a justification of biblical text that I could put to it, like gnashing of teeth. And that would be fighting between like the rage that I feel inside. Mm-hmm. But just in general, I already live. I mean, my quality of life is terrible. It's just mentally, it is terrible.
Yeah.
And I've gone to counseling for 30 years and did church for 15 years. I was sober for 17 years. I mean, there's nothing I haven't tried to improve my mind. Mm-hmm. And that's what I was telling you last night. I think I'm too damn smart for my own good because I can go down a nihilist road pretty easily. And then I can go down to an atheistic road pretty easily. So I battle between those worlds and I've grown very, very weary of fighting so hard to end up in the same spot.
Yeah. Nihilism is taxing.
It's
exhausting.
It's terrible because you see the negative. You actually feel the negative.
Yeah.
Not that you don't feel the positive. It's just like me. I'm a huge feeler. So I feel people's emotions. I feel negative emotions. I feel positive emotions, but I feel a room like heavily.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that does come with the territory of just being able to relate.
Yeah.
Or being empathetic.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
I mean, it is a gift in certain aspects, but it's also because of who I am. It's been a curse. because feeling actually sends me down a dark road, that if I were brought up in a healthy manner, or in a manner that showed me how to deal with those heavy emotions, then I would be able to manage that with a positive attitude, I think.
Yeah.
I've just never
Yeah.
learned how to do that.
It kind of does come down to like, are you positive or negative
Right.
towards your life?
Yeah.
Like I was telling you last night, like I would consider myself kind of a nihilist, because I don't really see an ultimate point in life to live and die with what's the end result, like it doesn't matter, because the sun's going to eat us up in a few billion years, and nothing we do will live on for eternity. And for some reason that matters to me. I don't know why, but it without that finality, without that, like it's just like a show. Without that finale that makes sense, that ties up all the loose ends, like I don't know, I kind of feel like Earth, like this life is kind of like the series Lost. I don't
Right.
know if you remember that, but
Oh, yeah.
it just like it kind of ends, and like a part of me is like, man, there's a lot of beauty in that, because it ends in the same way that got you hooked, right? Like you were hooked because of the mystery. And then when it ends in a mystery, you're bummed out about it. But like, why? you know,
Right.
like they're still leaving you with the wonder
Yeah.
that brought you into it.
Yeah.
But I don't know, man. I'm such a math person. Like that was what I studied in school. That having that final answer, having that solution is so necessary to add meaning to the process
Of life.
of of life, of anything. And I'm able to tie conclusions or able to get that answer to so many things in life. The answer to like this battle for love, or like this like confusing thing you go through with finding your partner, if you're lucky enough to find your partner,
Right.
is ultimately like to fall in love. And if you want to start a family and go through that process, the answer to starting a family is having a kid. And maybe that's enough for you in life. I thought it was going to be for me. Um or like even in something simple like a bike ride, the ultimate, like the final answer to that at the end is you're a little better mentally, physically. You might even get like a nice little dopamine buzz,
Right.
and it's all worth it. Like that's it. But after life, you just die, and like sure, your afterlife could be the things that you leave behind in your kids and in your family and friends, the ideas that you pass on, the love that you give, that uh will live on after you die. That, I guess, that's kind of like an afterlife. That kind of gives some purpose and meaning. Um
Well, yeah, I think an afterlife gives most people purpose,
yeah.
but they're terrified of finding out if it actually exists.
Oh yeah, and people are terrified. And that's why like it makes sense to me if you want to become a fundamentalist Christian or a fundamentalist anything. You want to get to that afterlife. You don't want to
Right.
go to hell.
Right.
And so, yeah, like if you want to get to heaven, yeah, damn right, gay people are bad. And damn right, you can't commit suicide.
Right.
If I don't tell you you can't do that, I'm not doing my job.
Right.
And like, how am I going to answer to God
Yep.
when he asks me when I'm up there,
I don't know what he's going to ask me. He already fucking knows.
right?
I'm like,
I love that like people like Sam Harris and Calvinists have like that idea of determinism.
I don't know what determinism is.
Basically the lack of free will. So
Oh,
like,
okay.
God has a plan for Calvinists.
Oh, it's already predestined.
yeah, it's
Predetermined?
predestined. Yeah, predestination.
Okay.
It's the exact same idea, only from a biological standpoint.
I wonder where they get that. Is it because they had some deja vu or something, and they're like, "Oh, I was supposed to be in this moment," and that's why I was kind of told you.
No, I
last
think
night.
I think it just comes down to like the all-knowing God. If God is all-knowing, then
that seems like a boring God.
dude, it is the lamest God, because it gives you no choice. Whoever is going to heaven was predestined. what a fucking stupid idea. Like,
Then why are we here?
Why go to church? You know,
Right?
why waste your time every Sunday? Like, it's just silly to me. It's so silly. Christianity without free will is so goofy, but you know, there's a lot of them out there.
Yeah, there is a lot of them out there. Yeah, I am worrying less and less, especially about not necessarily like a salvation, because I mean I'm faced with that because of my belief system. Um, and you know we had talked about this, that I got chastised for ridiculed, chastised, told I was a coward, told I was going to hell, blah blah blah. I'm like, do you understand that I live in hell all the time? For 50 fucking years, I've lived in hell. That's been my life. I've been in survival mode since I came out of the womb.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean,
So
it's like
what's next? I don't give a shit, man. Like I give two shits if I go to hell or not, because I'm already fucking there.
you
But
think
if there is an afterlife and if there is a God, I'll face him on it. He knows what the fucking's going on.
can you point to a time in your life where the net positives did outweigh the cons?
No,
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 never.
no.
You just always had, even when things were going semi well, you just still had demons that were.
Oh my gosh. So I have I figured out a lot in just this year about who I am and why I function the way I function. Figured out I got sensory issues, all of them. You know, all the five senses. I've highly sensitive. They actually create anger in me because I didn't know I didn't know what they were. I didn't know what was going on. You know, noises. I had to get those things to dampen noise for ears, for noises, because it sends me into a rage.
Yeah. Ugh.
So I figured out that I've got sensory issues, which that's a huge problem.
It's just a baby crying
Oh my
all the
God,
time.
dude. It's horrific, man.
I bet. Yeah.
And that's I think that creates anxiety, and it's like, man. So I figured out that's where my temper tantrums came from, and then I realized that when I get my buttons pushed to a certain degree, I can't stop the train. Like if I don't get away from myself, walk away from that situation, I can't stop the rage that comes out of me.
Yeah. I relate to that.
Yeah, my eyes go dark. I just infuriating, like dangerously.
You almost turn into
Oh,
a different person.
Oh my gosh, it's horrible.
Yeah.
Because this nice, calm guy that you might know I wrestle with some serious darkness.
Yeah.
But based on the story, it's understandable. It's actually less understandable that I am who I am on this side of it. Like I am a nice guy. I am a good person. At heart, I want the best for people. But when that comes out, that overshadows everything.
Yeah. If given your life, I'd probably just be sitting at the bar.
Yeah.
Why not?
Yeah. Well, like I told you last night, unfortunately I can't get overly drunk. my body will not let me. It's
let's get a bottle of whiskey and fix that problem.
Right. Then you'll see me naked, and then I'll be naked fighting.
I've done that.
But so let's continue with where were we at with your we just got out of high school, back into college.
So second year of college.
Yep.
And like when I lived in the mountains and I was going to college, those are the highlight years.
Oh man.
Like it was just,
that's a dream, dude.
Yeah, it had everything. I was still like playing music at church. I was starting to play in bands. I joined a jam band, which was great. Like we knew 3 songs, right? and maybe 5, right? But we'd get slotted for these 3-hour sessions, or not sessions, but shows at a bar. And they'd pay pretty good, and they'd give us free food and free beers all night.
Right.
And so we'd be able to pay like almost all of our rent with just playing these shows, knowing 3 songs and playing for 3 hours. And I'd just be playing like the pentatonic scale, which for anybody who knows music is like the simplest of scales. I'm just going up and down and C, And I played bass for it, so it was like an easy enough instrument to improvise. But it was great. Like we got people dancing, we got people loose. It was a freaking blast. And to get paid on top of it was like the funniest shit ever. But that's like a typical ski town.
Right.
You can actually get paid
Yeah.
for music there.
Yeah.
Well,
it's because a lot of your peers are endorsing you.
Oh yeah. Oh
And-
yeah. They
and
got
they're
nothing else to do.
And they're endorsing you, and they're excited for you, so that gets everybody else excited.
Exactly.
And then everybody else is endorsing you. It's like great.
This is a suicide podcast, so I feel like I can tell this story, and it's not one of the highlights of my music career. But at one point, everybody is out of their mind drunk, and we're on like the last song, and we start like this drum circle, and it's like ding, 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 ding. And then my drummer starts this chant. He's like, kill yourself, kill yourself. And the whole fucking bar at like midnight is chanting, kill yourself.
Oh my gosh.
And I'm just like, I'm thinking, it took me like 5 years to actually think about that again. And I was like, if some poor fuck was in there,
Right.
thinking to himself or herself, like
you just got 100 people endorsing your path.
what a sick thing. What a sick thing. I'm able to laugh about it now. You can't change the past, but something kind of regrettable.
Well, here's the thing. I mean, if you're that emotionally unstable, you shouldn't be out at the bar, number one. And number two, you should be in counseling of some sort, and at least getting help to some degree. Now, that being said, some people can't afford counseling. They can't afford. It's easier to go have a beer. It's easier to. They can't. That's the medication.
Yeah.
So, but to push somebody over the edge, they're already at the edge.
Yeah.
I mean,
for
there
sure.
are, they're at one toe
Yeah.
hanging on, and it's not really anybody's responsibility. It's like my path. I decided it's not going to be an emotional decision.
Mhm.
Fuck that. I'm going to be the determiner of my own existence from this point forth.
Yeah. That's an interesting way to think about it, whether the decision is emotional or not, because you would just assume that it's always emotional.
Well, I think 90% of the time it is. Now you got the outliers. I think I'm probably an outlier in this. And that's what I want to kind of bring to people. I'm not saying don't. I mean, I get the hell that people live in. And even part of the hell that you deal with and the anxiety, just on a minor scale.
Mhm.
Man, I would not want to have that. And it's like, fuck.
Yeah. Yeah. So I'll just keep going with the whole college thing. But second year in college, I meet my wife. And we date for 5 years. So from like 2007 to 2012 is when we got married. But I remember I was like so nervous because it was the first person I'd ever been really serious with. I was so nervous to tell her about my cross dressing.
Oh,
because I wasn't sure. And I told her about it one night, and it ended up just being like a fucking incredible, sexually intimate night of just pure non-judgment and acceptance.
Wow.
And I think it was at that moment that I fell in love with her.
Mm.
I've never ever been accepted. Now I have, but like
Right.
at that point, I'd never been accepted by anybody truly. There was always a bit of judgment.
And then you have somebody who's intimately attracted to you.
Yeah.
That's affirming you.
Yeah. And it was just like the most beautiful gesture. And it wasn't even a gesture, because I feel like a gesture is something you put effort into, is completely effortless by her. She wasn't in shock or anything. It was just like, wow, cool. Let's do some stuff. Let's do something with this.
Right.
So that was great. That opened, and that just, began a new chapter in my life. It was then her and I, it became her and I for forever. It still is. And, then we moved to the city. That was really fun. I got basically all I was doing was playing music and still working at the deli, finishing up school. That's when I was really hitting it hard with drinking, but it was still like I was so young and spry. I could just kind of bounce back and never really got in the way ever. It never got in the way. It would occasionally lead me to say something stupid or maybe like instigate a fight or something, but I was always able to like talk my way out of it or whatever I could just like wiggle myself out of certain situations. And it just was like a fun time, just a party. And I got really serious into school. I ended up being like a 4.0 student, and which was not me ever. I just kind of learned like how I studied the things that worked out for me, and started to really enjoy learning. And that's when I started getting into. I studied mechanical engineering, and with that, there's a lot of talk of like the science world, and I was a Christian, and so that started to really butt heads with some of my colleagues and I, not in a negative way. It was just like they would say like, little things here and there that would challenge my belief. And I was
your
like,
faith system.
my faith, yeah,
Yeah.
because I was still very much so a Christian. Um, you know, and so that's when I really started to explore. That's when it really started to happen, was like 2010 or so. Got married in 2012. My dad did the wedding. It was super beautiful. It was an incredible party. And it was very faith based. I was still in it. That was in 2012. Then in 2014, like things started falling apart at a pretty rapid pace. I got really into like Rob Bell and Science Mike and this sort of like what were they called? Like Michael Gunger, they were called like the liturgists or something.
Yeah, the liturgist.
Yeah. And I was like, oh, this is me. I'm a mystic now, you know? And uh that fell apart so rapidly.
Really?
I did not stay in that camp for long at all. And but I still like listened to that podcast. I went and saw like Rob Bell with Pete Holmes and Science Mike. I love that crew all the way until they stopped doing it.
Right.
Because they were the most open of Christians I had ever met.
Yeah, and they had a way of explaining their faith biblically, but it made you feel comfortable in the world.
Yeah, totally. And they had this way of really owning themselves.
Right. Yeah.
Like Science Mike was like purely evidence-based science guy. Right. And he still held on to this mystic belief, and his book, Finding God in the Waves, is a really good book. But in the end, I was like, how do you still hold on to this and then also hold on to this? Like I felt like such a fraud, and so ultimately I kind of decided like, I can't really call myself a mystic. I'll call myself like a Christ-leaning agnostic. That was kind of the best. I would still kind of put it in there because you can't change your past. I do think a lot of who I am today kind of falls on that Christian upbringing. At least the good parts.
Right. Yeah.
And then, once I started getting into like the idea of free will and Sam Harris, it was kind of destroyed me, left me with no afterlife. It was a pretty heavy time, brought up a lot of anxiety. At that point, my OCD was manifesting itself in really different ways. Pretty intense hypochondria. So I was diagnosing myself with like MS, ALS, and I thought for sure I had them. And, something that a lot of people struggle with generalized anxiety is being able to, or having their anxiety become physical. So like, let's say you think you have brain cancer, you start having all these headaches. You think you have ALS,
Gotcha. Yep.
You start feeling weakness in your hands and you lose grip on certain things. I remember playing music and I'd be just so caught up in my own mind. I'd be like in the middle of practice and I'd like drop a pick and it would just terrify the shit out of me because I thought I had ALS and I couldn't grip a pick anymore. And then when my OCD got in there, I would constantly be testing it. I'd pick up books by the middle part, seeing if I still had grip. I would constantly be looking at my hands, comparing them to one another. Am I atrophying in this? Do I still have muscle in this hand compared to my left hand? And it just became like this all-consuming thing that I thought about day in and day out. And it was just destroying. I gained a shit ton of weight. I was like 215 at one point.
No way.
I was just like this big guy. I wasn't working out ever. I was
Well,
just,
that surprises me because you've always been a biker.
yeah, yeah. And I kind of stopped biking for like 5 years.
Wow.
Yeah. I wasn't because of depression or anything. It was just like I was so busy I was doing a lot of like commuting, still on a bike every day, but it wasn't like going up a mountain like I do
Right.
now.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
uh, my mountain bike basically collected dust, and I got like really into like trendy like fixed gear riding and stuff, um, which doesn't really keep you in shape.
Right.
Skateboarding did a little bit. I was super into skateboarding, just being in the city. We had tons of
Yeah.
skate spots and great skate parks. Um, but yeah, I gained a ton of weight, was drinking a lot. Still hadn't hit like a all-time low by any means, at that
Wow.
point. So I was married for 2 years, got my first career job, which I think really played a role in anxiety. I went from
Oh
this
yeah.
like
I bet.
fast paced life
Yeah.
of just no time to think, barely even time to like eat and, drink a cup of water. I remember like lunch breaks would be like a minute. You'd inhale a sandwich and you'd chug a pint of water and you were good to go,
Right.
back on the line. And it was just like this really fast-paced life that then turned into no more school. I was making a ton of money. I was listening to a shit ton of podcasts. Just a ton of time to think and dwell.
Oh
And
yeah.
so my OCD really crept up on me and just plagued me. And then on top of that, just like I hadn't fully deconstructed my faith yet. It just only gave me time to think about that.
Right.
And
So that's when the deconstruction probably started.
really, really happened. I deconstructed in college. I was starting to, but it was fun. I was like really flirting with like, how much do I believe in this thing? Um, it was playful
Right.
at that point. And then over time, it became like a pretty serious, like, damn, this is kind of like what I built my life around, was this belief. And I don't know what day it was or whenever. I was finally like, I can't do it. I can't fake believing.
So
I don't
so let
believe
me
at
ask you
all.
this: Do you think do you feel, or maybe I don't know how to actually put that, but do you think you had more or less anxiety when you were a believer than you do now as a non-believer?
Oh, it's certainly less when I was a believer.
Oh,
Yeah.
really?
Yeah, definitely. I never really struggled with the, I didn't struggle. I struggled very little with like, fire and brimstone, sort of like, you have to believe in this or you're not getting into heaven.
Right.
I already didn't believe in hell from a very young age, that I never worried about that shit.
Okay.
For me, it was all about spreading love, and it's very like hippy dippy sort of belief.
Yeah.
So I never really struggled with like a whole lot of anxiety. The anxiety that would manifest was about, my confusion on like gender and where I stood with that. And even like, I'd consider myself mostly straight, like 95% straight.
Sure.
But that little 5% would really stress me out because it was just confusing, I guess, and it made me feel like a sinner or something.
Right.
So
Well, yeah.
sometimes I would
Yeah.
feel a little stressed out for that because of that. But no, my stress now, like, it's pretty bad. My anxiety is by no means gone. Um,
So what are you doing to? I mean, this will probably come on here a little bit later in the story, but what are you doing to maintain to combat?
oh man, I do like every hack in the book. Uh, I start my day out with gratitude. Then I do like a 10-minute meditation. Then I take my dog on a walk. Um, and then I'm trying to do this positive thinking thing, be less cynical. But fuck, man, it's so boring. Like I was used to living such a heightened life.
All
Just
right.
so like, if I was down, I was so down. But if I was high, I was so high,
Right.
and like just a messy life. I was used to that.
Yeah.
But like,
So it's almost mania.
yeah, it was total mania, but now I feel almost more manic than ever because I'm like, what do I do?
Really?
I'm just like kind of sitting here, but we should get to this in a second.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah, yeah.
I want to get to the to the part where I'm drinking a lot,
Okay.
where the party kind of ended.
Yeah.
But yeah, so like I think corporate America kind of, or my version of corporate America, which was working in oil and gas at first, and then solar second, kind of destroyed me. Just having too much time to think. I basically stopped growing mentally
Oh, wow.
in like an educational way. I
Right.
stopped learning
Yeah.
stuff.
That's fair.
I started researching a ton into like philosophy and these really like I can't think of the word right now. Big life matters, gosh, I wish I could
Sorry, I'm not following that one.
just like you're gonna have to cut this part out.
That's all right.
um
It's the real deal, Bob. It's the real deal, Bob.
I know. Oh yeah, that's right. My name is Bob.
It's not a very. I was thinking, Alexander Supertramp or something.
I should have gone with something freaking cool. Yeah.
We can cut it out and redo that. So you call yourself whatever you want.
Existential matters. That's what I was thinking of. Yeah. I started like just diving into those like big philosophy questions. And it was really fun. Yeah, I was really burnt out of school at that point. And that was the last bout of education I did, was a bachelor's in mechanical engineering. I was planning on getting like my master's, maybe a PhD, but I was just so burnt out. And I wanted to ultimately go into like teaching because I love school so much.
Oh, wow.
And it probably would have been really good for me. But instead, I landed on my first corporate job, which, there was a lot of blessings in there. It helped me afford a house, kind of get out of the city.
Which, being a teacher, you're not going to be that fortunate.
Yeah, exactly. You got to be a decent teacher. I don't even know.
Well, and you got to go to professors. I mean, you got to get up into the a little bit higher level or go into administration of some sort to make any sort of money in the school system.
Yeah. So, yeah, bought a house, got a dog, kind of living this like American dream. And I started to like really question, like, is this it? And this is when I started getting like pretty anxious and pretty depressed. Like all my goals had been reached. I was able to afford all the instruments I ever wanted to afford, which like I'm really into synthesizers. So it was always really expensive. And so getting like the next synthesizer was a huge deal. It was now not, it was like, I was getting, my favorite mountain bikes, and I just like had every material product that I ever wanted. And it just, got me high for a little bit. And so then, once my faith deconstructed, I really kind of turned to drinking as like my go-to. So I was drinking pretty good for like 8 years. And it would go in waves, where it was like pretty good. I would wake up most mornings hungover at least, but over time I started waking up still drunk. And I was never a morning drinker. I'd usually try and hold out until about 5. Once, but I kind of like, since I didn't have that afterlife anymore, I kind of gave every hope into drinking. Like I always used to joke around, like, today may suck, but at least you get to drink at the end. At least you got beer in the end. And I really believed that. Like I really looked forward to drinking every night. Yeah, I was like, you made it through another day. You are making money. You're being a good enough husband. You're being a good enough dog owner at that point, which later turned into you're being a good enough parent.
Right.
And I was basically just going over the lowest bar that I could in every part of my life, because drinking was it. And that was the only thing that I really, I love to do other things. I love to play music. I love to mountain bike still, but it really was like everything was on the back burner. And it was, if my bottle was taken away, I'd throw a fit. And soon it started to be taken away. I'd start to get a little too drunk and slur my words when I really shouldn't be, like at a dinner party or something. Or just hanging out with some like sober friends. I'd be the only one drinking, or I kind of like was surprised when I realized I was drinking more than everybody. When I started noticing that, I was like, oh shit, I didn't realize I was like a heavier drinker.
Yeah.
I thought I was just drinking like everybody else.
I know I am. So I'm just like, they're just going to have to accept
Yeah.
it.
So, but as a drinker, as like an addict, you let it bug you for like a minute.
A minute. It's maybe 30 seconds anymore.
Yeah. And then you're like, yeah, fuck it,
Yep,
whatever.
this is my life. Fuck it.
Yeah. Yeah. It just takes me more because I'm a bigger guy, whatever.
Yeah.
And like, I grew out like a beard and I just got this big belly and I kind of was owning this like big guy thing. And, not really giving a shit about my physical health. And in your 20s, you can get away with that. And then I had my first kid when I was 30. And man, that like leading up, the 9 months leading up to that, and like the first 6 months after, it's like a year and a quarter or so, I was like biking my best. I was, not really drinking a whole lot. And it didn't bother me that I wasn't drinking. I had this like new thing. I had this child coming. And, I was like writing a ton of songs. It was incredible. Like every day it was like, oh, what's a way I can.
That's what purpose does.
I know, dude. I talk about it like it's this big mystery. It's like, nah, that's just called purpose.
It is. No, it is a big mystery because people, and here's the thing, people like me don't have a lot of purpose. And even when we do, we can't see it.
Yeah. Well, and I just don't, if you can't feel your purpose.
Right.
It's not purpose.
Right.
So anyways, when my daughter was about 1, I started drinking really heavily. I think I just kind of fell into I just became complacent in all aspects of life at that point. So I was like, I was a good enough designer at work. I had enough friends. I was making music that was okay. And I was a good enough dad.
Right.
And I was a good enough partner. All these things I was just good enough at. So I started, my thing became boxed wine because I couldn't count how many. Like I'd always
it's very deceptive.
Yeah. So,
boxed wine. I get 4 bottles over 4 days. Nope. You get a bottle and a half a day. Maybe
exactly.
2.
Yeah, when you pulled out the box wine, I was like, "Oh, baby!" Like that brings me back to about 5 years ago, where I would just, I would drink like 3 to 5 beers, and these are big beers. These are like 7-8% IPAs.
Oh my god!
And I'd get a nice strong buzz, and then when my wife would go to sleep with my daughter, who was 1, I would go out into the kitchen and I'd like stretch and just drink goblets of wine. And I never really knew how much I was drinking.
Yeah.
And it didn't bother me because of that. So I would wake up basically every morning, like pretty buzzed, very out of it. Certainly shouldn't have been driving. And I was like driving my daughter to, daycare is right down the road. It wasn't, I guess, terribly dangerous, but it's something that I look back on and I'm like, fuck, man, like that was dangerous. That was irresponsible.
Well, and it's not just your life anymore.
Exactly. Yeah, there's a little baby in the back.
Yeah.
It's like, it's so
if
sad.
that shit doesn't wake you up, if your kids don't change you, and I've said this so many times, even though my kids don't talk to me, if they don't change you, if kids don't change you, nothing will.
Yeah.
Nothing.
Yeah.
Because they teach you how to love.
And if anything, it made me drink more.
Really?
It was just the stress of being a parent.
Yeah.
And then like, OCD and anxiety was still kind of manifesting itself in these weird ways, very dark ways I don't even feel comfortable talking about, because it's just like, it's so taboo that
This is a taboo podcast, my friend.
All right. Well, there's this sect of OCD called pedophilic OCD.
Okay.
It's called POCD. And about half of people who think they're pedophiles actually have POCD, and they've done tests on like, lie detectors to see who is and isn't.
Okay.
Which like being in the room during that would be such a trip, But people who are actual pedophiles typically don't like have any fear about it, similar to like me being a cross-dresser. And I don't want to relate the two at all because
right.
Today they are being related, like
they
if you're
are
trans, people,
they've really fucked this whole thing up.
Yeah, they call trans people groomers and stuff. It's just There's zero evidence for that. I want to make sure if anybody ever listens to this.
There's some select few on the internet that are, and it's creepy as fuck.
Yeah, but there's no correlation between trans people and pedophilia.
Right. But what I'm saying is it's starting to give that stigma because they're picking it apart and identifying with the trans group.
Oh, right. Yeah. They're lobbing it in with the LGBTQ plus community for sure.
Go ahead.
So that like tormented me for months, thinking that like I had to like, you do these OCD, you do these compulsions and rituals, and it was like, I don't think I want kids, and it caused this pretty big rift in ways that I didn't even think was possible. So I started going to therapy pretty heavily around then. And this is actually before my first kid. So yeah.
So this created a rift prior you guys having a discussion.
Yeah, I kind of backtracked a little bit. Yeah, we had a discussion, and then after like getting some therapy about it and working it out and like kind of overcoming that OCD behavior, it was like the same way you'd overcome like, oh, now I don't fear ALS anymore. That took about a year for that.
So by identifying it and kind of working through that process, accepting, maybe not accept, I don't know how you'd put that, but maybe accepting who you are.
Yeah.
That kind of peeled away the fear.
Yeah. And that's a huge practice in the OCD world, is like treating as this idea called radical acceptance. And I hadn't been introduced to it until like a few months ago even. So I'm like really doing the work now. But back then I really didn't have any resources, besides a little bit of therapy. And I kind of just had to let time do its work. So yeah, anyways, start drinking a lot. Basically have a point where I crash. And I like break down to my wife and I'm like, I can't drink anymore. I'm dying, like every day is a struggle to get through. My anxiety is through the roof. I'm like, my face is all swollen. And at that point, it's kind of got that red nose thing going on. And so I take like 50 something days off. It's nothing,
Right.
And I don't do any work.
It's a reset.
Yeah. I don't do any work. I'm like, let's just take some time off. I'll get sober, and I don't go to like a single AA meeting, no therapy over it, nothing, absolutely nothing. I'm just like white knuckling it the whole time. So I go back. I'm like, yeah, maybe I can just go back. And at that point, I also get addicted to the stuff called kratom, which is this unregulated opiate that you can buy at like gas stations and stuff. And the high is pretty mediocre. I don't recommend it to anybody, but it was a substitute for drinking at night. And it's got a ceiling too. So you can't, you can probably OD from it, but you don't want to.
Right.
If you have more than your window allows you, you start feeling like really agitated and kind of nauseous. So it's kind of beautiful in that way. If you go over, it's like you and drinking.
So it's like me and drinking. Yeah. Like my threshold is pretty low.
Exactly. And so it only lets you go up a certain amount. So I kind of coasted on that for like a good 2 years. And then had another like weird breaking moment where I was like, it's like, hey, I just got to go pick up some wood from Lowe's, which is like way the fuck out.
So you're always making up excuses.
And it's like off this gnarly road in Denver, Denver,
that's all right.
Whatever, Colfax. And if you're going to Colfax for anything, like you're doing something wrong.
Yeah.
Unless you're buying a car. That's about it. So I kind of nip that. I taper down from that. I get off of this stuff called kratom. And then I just start drinking a ton again. But I'm drinking now these like bomber, because like the amount I have is really gets to me. So I couldn't have like 10 beers, but I could have like 3 double IPA 19-ounce bombers. That would equate to 10 beers. But in my mind, if someone asked me how much I'd have to drink,
3 beers.
I had 3 beers, So, and it's like, that's a big thing in AA, is like trying different routes to drinking to kind of trick yourself. So then I've got this, I kind of go on like a weekend bender, and I keep doing this. Oh, actually so the drummer of my band had he was an alcoholic.
I was going to ask you about him. I didn't know if we wanted to touch on that subject, but I think it's probably relevant.
So I didn't know that withdrawing from alcohol was a thing.
Oh man.
Yeah, I didn't know it was
So it'll
possible.
kill you if you're not careful.
Exactly. And that's what happened to my buddy. So the drummer of my band, we were in New Mexico playing a show, and he is like shaking the whole day. And I'm like talking to my bassist. I'm like, dude, is he okay? Like, and my bassist, like, they're like best friends from childhood. So really hard on my bassist when this all happened. And he was like, yeah, he's just like dehydrated, which actually made sense. We were out in the desert, it was super
Yeah,
hot.
that's fair. Yeah.
Yeah, and he's just like throwing up, can't keep any water down. I'm just like, dude, should we like take him into the town, which is 45 minutes away? And then we're like, yeah, whatever, we all start drinking a little bit. He doesn't though. He doesn't really take part in it.
See, and he should have.
Oh yeah.
He
They
should have.
definitely should have.
It would've
If
saved
he
his
would have
life,
just had
probably.
like 3 more beers, he would have been probably would have been fine. And if he just would have kept that going. But he had been drinking about, like, when we talked to him, when he recovered, he had been drinking about a handle a day for 10 years.
Holy shit.
And so he was like withdrawing very, very bad.
Oh my God. He went to
Shaking
shock.
hands. His whole body was shaking.
Yeah.
And then someone brought in this like big poster after the show and was like, hey, can everybody sign this? And he's there with a Sharpie and he can barely get it to touch the paper, and then has a seizure. And this is in the middle of the fucking desert. And he falls down on the concrete. He's then seizing in a pool of blood. It is the gnarliest thing I've ever seen. I immediately just like go into shock. I'm like crying, just seeing someone who is as helpless as a newborn baby, and I'm just like, what the fuck is happening? And so he gets taken to the ambulance. Fortunately, there was like 4 paramedics there drinking at the bar, taking care of him. They knew exactly what to do. And so then they took him to the nearest town, which was again 45 minutes away. So he was like going in and out of seizures for 45 minutes till the ambulance came. It was a big deal.
Wow.
I managed to get extremely drunk after, just to like try and forget what I had just seen. And I still thought he was just like, I didn't know he was withdrawing from alcohol. I still didn't know it at that point. So he went to the hospital for like an hour. They discharged him.
No.
Yeah, they discharged him because they thought he was dehydrating.
No.
Which is so fucking stupid. They go to the hotel. So he ends up having another seizure in his bed in the hotel. And I go and pick up my bassist from the hotel and I peer into the room, and his bed is just blood. Like, it's so...
Where's the blood coming from?
From when he knocked his head on the...
Oh, from the seizure.
And if you've ever seen someone like skateboarding hit their head,
it's ugly.
It just like sprays out.
Oh
man.
my
It's
gosh, dude.
so crazy. And so he ends up going into the hospital for a week to get his vitals right. A week it took just to get his vitals like straightened up. And then he went to a rehab. He got sober, and it took him like another month to relapse after that. And he lasted for a while. And that was actually the last time I ever saw him was at the show. And I was like really amped to see him sober.
Right.
Just to see how different he looks, see his attitude. Because I had never known him when he never drank,
Right.
But yeah, ended up like withdrawing again, had a seizure in front of his family like Thanksgiving. It was just like, it was so sad. He never really got to his whatever was causing him to drink. Maybe he just liked to drink. I don't know. But
some people just get a hold of it. It's not even trauma. It just gets a hold of them, man.
Yeah. Yeah. The buzz is good enough.
Yeah.
But then he ended up dying in like December of that year. We all sent him a text like, hey man, we know you're drinking again. You can do this. You can get sober. And he kind of just stopped, so I kind of felt like a little weird about that, almost like responsible. He just stopped. He didn't take his withdrawal medication or anything. He just stopped, and it killed him.
Oh, wow. Just cold turkey off of that.
Yep.
Wow.
Which is, I've dealt with alcohol withdrawals in a very moderate way, shaky hands, no delirium tremens, nothing like that. And it is fucking terrifying.
Oh yeah.
You're just like hyperventilating. You think you're going to die. It's so terrifying.
Yeah.
The fact that he was able to do that 3 times, just like, man, like if you're strong enough to do that, he was strong enough to do anything.
Right.
The ability to just cold turkey it from alcohol is one of the strongest things. And I know it's kind of weird sounding, but it's one of the strongest things you could do. If you could somehow incorporate that into sobriety, those are the people who become like,
well, they're unstoppable.
Yeah, who become ultra Ironmen,
Right.
So that was a huge eye opener for me. And that day forward, I kind of feared withdrawing, even when I wasn't drinking a whole lot.
So your OCD kicked in.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah, baby. And so like I had to taper, like if I had a big weekend, I had to taper throughout the week and kind of like, 5 beers one night, 4 beers another. And all this stuff. If you're an alcoholic and you've been in some meetings, none of these stories are new.
Right.
This is everybody.
Yeah.
And that's the other thing you do as an alcoholic. You compare yourself to like, at least I wasn't drinking a handle a night for 10 years, and it's like, no,
I'm
you're
not
missing
that.
the point. You are that. And you just don't realize it yet.
Yeah.
It's tough, man. It's the last thing you want to do is admit your problems, because then you have to stop and then you have to face your problems without your comfort.
Right.
So yeah, basically I stopped again. I took 100 days off during 2020 because when things started closing up, I just really hit it hard with drinking. And, I didn't have an office to go into anymore. I kind of stopped hanging out with friends because we kind of didn't know what was going on. Didn't want to spread it. Didn't want, to be the cause of people dying.
Right.
And my wife was pregnant again. So
wow.
I really didn't want to get her sick. So I basically just hibernated, And so I was like, okay, I'll take 100 days off starting in May, ending in whatever, August. And basically night one, I went right back into my same old habits. And fast forward 2 years later, holidays, if you're in active addiction and you got a holiday coming up, it's like, it's a thing to fear.
Yeah.
Because you just know it's open season. You're able to go however hard you want to. And I went hard that season, and some things came up with my brother and I that weren't good. And I was like just so depressed, so suicidal. Just didn't see much of a point in it all. And then, my son was born, and I woke up one morning just like, shaky hands. It was a Monday morning, and I was just feeling it from the weekend. I just started drinking. I was just overwhelmed, and I just morning drank. And that morning, my son was sick with croup, and I was supposed to take him in. And croup is gnarly. Like their esophagus closes up, and, and so like I kind of felt like he was okay. And so I was just like, I'm just going to drink to kind of ease my anxiety, and then I'll take him into the hospital. I ended up drinking too much, and I have to call in my wife. I'm like, hey, I've got a serious problem. It's 10 a.m. at that point. And I'm like,
wow,
on my way to being drunk. Yeah. And that wasn't even enough. So I was sober again for 2 months, and then I went back into it, had a crazy weekend for 5 days, just a weekend lapse, and then got sober again. Then I went to my first like AA meeting.
A weekend is only 3 days.
I know.
That's a long weekend. It's 3 days.
Sorry, it was like 5 days actually. It was
a really long weekend.
Yeah, it was an alcoholics weekend.
That's a good way to put it.
And so then I'm like, okay, I actually need some help. I'm gonna do work on my OCD. I'm gonna do work on my anxiety, and I last another like 3 months, and then that was last year. We ended up buying this house, moving into the mountains, and the whole year was rocky. That was when I got hit by a car on my bike. That was when I was doing all sorts of crazy shit. I was like getting blackout for no reason. I was like telling friends to leave my house. It's just doing stuff that was like so out of the ordinary for myself.
Kind of irrational.
The wedge between my wife and I was getting, it was just driving us further and further apart. Drinking was by no means a form of fun for us anymore. She basically stopped at that point. She's like, I don't want to encourage you to do this, so I'm done. And I just kept going. That's this hot tub right here got way more use when I was drinking, because it was always like, I'm just going to go out to the hot tub for an hour and, chug a few beers. So it became a problem just in every part of my life. My work ethic was down the drain. And then the bender that I went on, I'll call it the Bentonville bender because that's where my buddy and I went. It was this bike trip, and basically it was 6 days of nonstop drinking. Wake up, throw up, drink, throw up, drink, throw up, drink, bike ride, drink, drink. By about 5, I'm done throwing up, and I'm then just drinking.
Yeah, you're settled in.
Yeah, I'm feeling fine finally.
The
I'm able
alcohol
to
is
eat some
finally-
food. It's like, I'm waking up, shaky hands or not, because I'm still drunk from the day before, but I'm having, like 20 to 30 drinks or units of alcohol a day for about 6 days. I get home, I black out. I'm watching my kids blacked out, in and out of a blackout. I somehow managed to keep them safe, get them down. It was the darkest time. I remember laying on my couch, very drunk, basically skipped my kids' swim practice, my daughter's kindergarten evaluation, like these very important things, baseline things.
Right. Yeah.
And I'm just like sitting on the couch, we're watching a movie. My dog, who's a total puppy at the time, is just pissing all over the house. The house is a total wreck. It stinks like shit. And I'm just like staring at this wall, like, what the fuck? I can't text people back because I can't even like move my fingers. And I'm just like sneaking down and I'm like throwing up in between all this. I'm going out to that cabin right there and throwing up. And it's like making me sweat talking about it because it's not something that I've still dealt with.
Good.
Yeah. As it should.
Yes, it should always make you sweat.
Exactly. Yeah.
Because those are the things that keep you in check and keep you moving forward in a positive direction.
Exactly. And it basically got, so to finish it, my friends came and they came to the house. The wife of this couple took my kids and took them to school. It was Tuesday in the morning at 8. It's a Tuesday morning at 8 a.m. I was so drunk I couldn't even get myself dressed. And at that point, I knew it was happening. This thing that I'd wanted to happen for so long that I thought was going to be like a DUI, or I was going to kill somebody, or I was going to like severely hurt myself, or my kids, heaven forbid something happened to my kids. It was basically as bad as it could have gotten without anything physically permanent happening to my body, I hate that I just mentioned that first, to my kids, to my body, to my relationship with my wife, to all this stuff. I mean, emotionally, it'll take a lot of recovery, but
from their side or from yours?
Both.
Okay.
So yeah, my friend takes me into the ER. I blew a 3.5, which is like a pretty high number.
And that's after you got to the hospital.
That's after I got to the hospital. Yeah, that was around 9 a.m.
You had a little time to sober up.
Yeah, that was around 9. I fell asleep till 10:30. I look at the clock and I'm like, whoa, it's already 10:30 at night. Like I was just so out of it, and the doctor was like, no, you've only been here for an hour and a half, brother. And, man, I started withdrawing so bad. And I was so thankful to be in the ER, just close to medication that could help ease the suffering.
Saline.
Whatever the fuck it was they gave me helped. And there was this woman that came in.
They may have given you, I think they do Narcan even for alcohol.
It wasn't Narcan. It was like something arbutal or something. I don't know. It was really good. Whatever it was, it worked. So yeah, this woman came in and she's like, hey, you look like you could use a hug. And I give her a hug and I'm like crying, I'm at my lowest, my weakest point. She's like, hey, I just want you to know here, I'm 4 months sober. And I was right where you were 4 months ago. And it's cool because now I'm 4 months sober telling the story. And which is just, I'm an infant in sobriety.
You will be for years.
Yeah. They call long-term
Don't think because you get a couple, you're...
I know. It's nothing. It's nothing.
Yeah. But it's got to change the psyche. It doesn't really matter if you stay the same. You're still just as miserable. You got to change your psyche on
exactly. That. Yeah. And So that was really nice. She gave me a coin. She's like, here, take this for good luck. And it was really sweet, really meaningful. It was exactly what I needed at that point. My wife was out of town. She came home early. My parents flew in. That was when I knew it was bad. That was when I was like, okay, I'm actually done drinking. Which I should have known, by being in the ER.
Well, that's where you get better, man. So you can go back and do it again.
Exactly. Like the first couple stories in the AA book, the big book, they talk about their stories, and they're so much gnarlier, and you think you have to get to that point to really make a change,
Right.
but like it's just not the case. Like you make a change when you're ready.
Well, yeah, and it's like for me, I'm at the extreme of coming close to my end, but things are changing at the same time.
Yeah, which for me, so this was another, like I was given the opportunity then, nothing permanent had happened to a lot of things in my life that were most important.
Right.
So it was an opportunity.
You kept your job.
Yeah, it was as bad as it could have gotten without wrecking everything or wrecking really anything. I've got a lot of work to do with my relationships, with some friends and my parents, and most importantly, my wife. But it really just gave me the opportunity to reinvent myself again.
Yeah.
And I've been looking into sobriety for so long, and I don't think this is an uncommon thing with sober people. I think it's a very common thing. They start thinking about sobriety way before they get sober.
For sure. For sure.
So yeah, I went to a 2-week inpatient rehab and then a 2 to 3 month, I kind of forget how long it was, to an outpatient mental health rehab. And now I'm getting help specifically for OCD. Yeah, I wouldn't say like any strings are tied yet with that stuff. Now I don't have the bottle to lean on.
Right.
So I'm able to face my problems head on, which is really painful. And honestly, if you talk to me right now, it probably wouldn't seem worth it to get sober, because I haven't reached that arc, of like, man, my life in every way is so much better. My life is better in so many ways. Like some are very myopic. Like I'm a better mountain biker. I look a lot better. I look like a fucking snack, y'all.
Agreed.
I'm like sex is great. I'm more present. There's so many things that are already so much better. But like my OCD isn't worse, but it's not gotten any better. Because OCD takes a lot of time to manage. You're never cured of it. You just learn how to manage it.
Yep.
And you manage it in the most annoying way. You manage it through exposure therapy. So you just have to expose yourself to the thing you don't want to think about.
Right.
And you got to basically meditate on that for hours. So
that's like Mike McCarr. He got in that motorcycle accident and he would meditate on his headache.
Yeah.
It's
yeah,
like,
exactly.
I would just embrace the pain and meditate on it.
Exactly. I forgot about that.
Yeah.
So I'm about a week or 2 into starting that therapy.
Okay.
That intensive therapy. And that's going to be one thing. And then, but like other things, like finally starting to find some self-love, going back to like this cross-dressing thing. I've kind of embraced the idea that I am gender fluid, and it does kind of fall under the trans umbrella. And I don't outwardly like show the world that,
right.
But internally I'm, emotionally I'm very feminine. And I just feel feminine. I'm kind of embracing that to a degree I never have. And it feels very much so as a self-love practice, the same way that meditation does, or putting vegetables in my body, or going mountain biking.
Right.
It's just a form of self-love.
Yeah.
And because that caused a lot of shame.
putting vegetables.
I know. I was like, how do I word that? Am I like eating right? A good diet.
I'm not sure where you're putting them, but
Not shit. Not
that's
shit.
great, man.
Yeah.
As long as it reduces the anxiety.
Yeah, putting vegetables up my butt is like self-love to a T. Oh man. Yeah.
Sorry. Yeah, we're not cutting that either.
No, we're definitely not cutting that. Now the world will know where I put my veggies.
Right. Oh man.
But it's taken a lot. I think I've gone to like 200 hours of therapy in the past 4 months.
Wow, that's a lot.
I've been meditating for like 10 years, and it's like it finally started to make sense to me.
Do you think it became more intentional?
No, I think it stayed the same, but I just kind of realized what it was for me. I think meditation is different for a lot of people, but for me, it's like, I'll try and explain it the best way I can. The idea of, it's really in tune with OCD because you've got these thoughts, and that's kind of what plague you with OCD. But all they are thoughts. And if you if you do a guided meditation, they say that, if you're thinking about, if your mind starts to drift, come back to your breath and in a non-judgmental way, because those thoughts were just thoughts, and you don't have to judge yourself for getting a quote unquote off topic. You just come back to your breath, and it's that move right there. It's going from the thought itself to the breath that helps me. It's that exercise, that move from the thought to the breath helps me now get in, like, kind of snap back into the present moment.
Yep.
And I find myself doing that a lot more now. Like, and this is
it's almost automatic when you practice it enough.
Yeah. So that's one layer in it. I'm becoming more present, which is really nice when you're parenting. Because your mind constantly wants to go somewhere else when they're like throwing a fit or all this stuff. But then doing it in a non-judgmental way helps with the OCD side of things. Now I'm able to think of like a haunting thought, like back in the day, because I was in the church, involved in the church, like being gay was a huge fear. So I'd have like sexual OCD, and now I can treat it as, now if I knew it's kind of unrelatable now because I don't see any sin involved in being gay like I used to.
Right.
I see it as a form of love and only that. So it's like, it's kind of nothing for me now, but maybe something even more taboo, like going back to the pedophilia thing. I could have a thought like that would scare me, that is like, oh, did I feel something that I shouldn't have, when I looked at my daughter, and then you get in your mind about that. Now I'm able to just kind of like let it drift away and just treat it as, oh, that was just a thought. That is a symptom of my OCD. And the problem with that is, like, that's not really something you can talk about without someone jumping to conclusions. So it's kind of
condemnation, criticism.
Yeah.
Whenever they want to lock you up.
But when I was in the depths of like being tormented by pedophilic OCD, when I finally found people who were talking about their OCD manifesting itself in that way, I felt the biggest sense of relief. Like, it almost disappeared that day.
Well, you get this sense that you're the only one that struggles with this.
Yeah.
And the reality is that there's a community of people. In any struggle you have, there's a community of people that struggle with the same thing.
Yeah.
Problem is there's no voice.
Yeah.
If you can't speak it out, you can't really do anything about it.
Mm-hmm.
And that's my belief. Anyway.
And you've got all these. We'll just go on a quick tangent real quick.
Sure.
While we're on the subject, you've got a lot of politicians right now who are talking about helping the kids. It's all about the kids. You gotta help the kids. If you really want to help kids from being groomed or being preyed upon, open up a fucking therapy for pedophiles. Let them feel okay to reach out for help. Because right now, if someone is actually a pedophile and they reach out for help, they're going to be put in jail, or they're going to be completely ostracized, or and you know what that'll drive them to do is act.
Yeah, and that's the whole thing. That's the whole point of this.
Yeah.
It's not pedophilic in nature, but with suicide, if you can give a voice to the struggle, it doesn't mean they act out on it. Actually, if you give the voice, they can do something about it.
Yeah.
And you can actually, even with like the pedophilic notion, like if you can speak it out, then you can get help.
Mm-hmm.
If you keep it internalized, you'll never ever get any help, and the chances of you acting on that, because it will become overwhelming, is pretty high.
Yeah, and that would soon become your only outlet, or only outlet to freedom, essentially.
Yep.
You know, you kill yourself with booze, or you act on your, you know, highest sexual desire, which is what that would be for a pedophile. And if there are ways to, I honestly have no idea what therapy like that would look like, but I have no doubt that it would only help.
I would think so too, and that's kind of also the point, is not only direct people to therapy, but to start walking alongside them in their struggle, and you'll see that. And I don't know how it is for you, but we'll just relate the two in the suicide aspect. The more I can talk about it, the less likely I'm going to go do it. Okay.
Yeah. I want to bring this back to my dad real quick.
Sure.
Because this reminds me, when you talk about walking side by side with someone.
Yeah.
My dad always told me growing up, everyone's normal till you get to know them. Yeah. And that kept me sane through high school. And I still love thinking about it today, because all people want to do is be able to not feel alone.
Right.
You know, how crazy. Yeah. What an idea.
Everybody wants to be normal, but nobody's normal.
Yeah.
So, well, let's wrap this up. Thanks, man, for doing this. Thanks for sharing your story.
Yeah, man.
Any words of advice you want to give before we close this out? You want to pray about it?
Yeah, we should pray about it. Let's do the Eucharist real quick. I don't know if I have anything right now.
Well, that's all right. You know, at some point, maybe we'll do
find a friend, find someone you can relate to. Find your tribe, really. Yeah. Like, if you can, you know,
start working.
Everybody's got the internet. Find your tribe.
Yeah, and start working on reinventing yourself in a positive way.
Yeah.
I mean, that's key.
Yeah, positive vibes.
Quit worrying about everybody's judgment and start, you know, if you have to move away. But
and I would say, like, try and not be cynical.
Yeah.
I think that cynicism is a poison that I've drank way too much of. And trying to keep that out of your life is going to do you a world of good.
Yeah. Well, thanks, man. I appreciate it. Love you.
Thank you, Sarah.
Yeah, this has been great. It's good to be here. All right, let's close it out. All right. Well, thanks for joining us on the Suicide Monk today. Hope you enjoyed it. If you have any comments, leave them below. And if you feel like your story belongs on this podcast, reach out and we will do our best to make that happen. If you need help, please reach out to somebody that is qualified to do so. Peace. Have a great day. Suicide Monk out.